McCain is the true neoconservative. He was a neoconservative before Bush was a neoconservative. President Bush often says that 9/11 changed him. Well, McCain didn't change on 9/11. He remained the same. On April 10, 2008, Elizabeth B. Miller wrote in the New York Times, one component of the fractious Republican Party foreign policy establishment, the so-called pragmatists, is expressing concern that Mr. McCain might be coming under increased influence from a competing camp, the neoconservatives. Well, with all due respect to Ms. Buemiller, our view is that the competition for McCain's soul has long been over. McCain has been advocating a neoconservative agenda prior to 9/11, and he is still fiercely advocating that agenda today. The central components of that agenda include rogue state rollbacks through the use of preventive war, and then the repudiation of tough diplomacy with our nation's enemies. I think it's important to underscore here that the United States has a long tradition, a proud tradition of leadership through engagement. We've seen it through Clinton in North Korea, Reagan in the Cold War, Carter at Camp David, Ford at the Helsinki Accords, Nixon in China, Kennedy, the Cuban Missile Crisis. You go on. And the neoconservative agenda says, let's replace this proud tradition of engagement with the iron fist and the willy-nilly commitment of military force.
Well, if you listen to John McCain's speeches, particularly his May 13th speech where he talked about what Iraq might look like in 2013, he defines an end state but doesn't actually discuss how you get there. And I think this is wrapped up in a lot of the issues that Faiz highlighted in his presentation and some of the similarities between Senator McCain and President Bush. And you've seen the documents we have, and I think they're very worthwhile. But I think at a very deep level, John McCain's worldview and how the world operates impacts how he focuses on Iraq and focuses, I think, to the detriment of other national security challenges. If you read John McCain's essay in Foreign Affairs last year, he said it was an enduring peace built on freedom. I want to highlight freedom because freedom is a consistent thread between President Bush and John McCain, and I would submit that freedom is just another word for not having a real national security strategy, in this case for keeping us safe. John McCain proposes an end state where Iraq is a free and democratic state. He also proposes not leaving Iraq till the job is done. There's a lot of rhetoric, but he never answers one fundamental question. What are the conditions under which U.S. troops would begin to come home?
At a time when we are facing a host of global challenges ranging from climate change to the global food crisis, where we have a situation where, according to most experts, there are in excess of 50 countries in the world that qualify as weak or failing states. These are states that are, as Afghanistan was before the attacks of September 11th. It leaves little time or energy to focus on any of those. I'm not persuaded, however, that Senator McCain is particularly concerned about any of those things because he doesn't speak about them. His focus is almost exclusively on Iraq and to some lesser extent on Iran. So I don't think this is someone whose worldview in terms of national security includes other than a threat broadly defined as terrorism, but which includes within that lens everything from Iraq to Iran to anybody who strongly disagrees with the views of the United States. While he's showing a great and enthusiastic proclivity to use force, he said very little about either diplomacy and negotiations or working with our allies, many of whom he's disparaged, or about development, and that's one of the key tools.
Nobody in America's word on torture matters more than John McCain. And when we get to a situation where he has seemed to abandon the principle that the position on U.S. government towards torture says more about us than it does about anything else, and when in February of this year he voted against the Intelligence Authorization Act, which would have applied the Army Field Manual to the CIA, that sends the message that simply the CIA can engage in these types of practices, but the military cannot. And John McCain seems to be in favor now of the CIA engaging in these practices. Now that says to me that it's not any longer about principle. And that is something that I feel very sad about. It's hard for me to get up here and criticize John McCain on his stance on torture. But it's one of those issues that I feel very deeply and strongly about, and I think a lot of the people who were working on that issue and were in our community who were fighting the Bush administration's policies from the very beginning looked to John McCain for leadership on that issue, and he seems to have fallen at the last hurdle.